we will have an attendee poll and some general updates. And then Andrew Hahn is going to talk about yarn cartography. Colleen Hayes is going to talk about a Viz-a-Month effort that she's doing on Tableau Public. I am going to do part of our Tableau Can Do That series that we started. So unusual things that you can do with Tableau that people don't always know about. And then we'll have a live Q&A and a winner announcement of who wins our swag. So Jen, can you remind me what people have to do to get the swag?
Yeah, we just need you to fill out a very brief form so you can give us your contact info and let us know what you want as your reward. So Brandy will be sending that out after we've chosen our winners. So stay tuned.
Perfect. And those winners are going to come from the Q&A, right?
Yeah, 2 of the winners are going to be chosen from people who ask questions throughout today's event. So there's actually a Q&A button, I think, down at the bottom. So it's different from the chat. So we'll be picking 2 winners from the Q&A portion. And then 1 winner will be chosen from folks who have attended the meeting. So if you've attended, if you're here today right now, you're already entered to win, but you can increase your odds by asking questions.
Cool. Thanks, ladies. All right, so we will, I'm going to back up. Jen, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to let you take it away with the poll.
Fantastic. All right, everyone, we like to do these getting to know you polls just to have a better sense of our audience, who's here, what are some of your hobbies or interests, just a little bit of fun. So we're going to all go to kahoot.it. I'm going to put this in the chat as well. And you'll just go to that site and then you'll enter the 7-digit PIN number. Feel free to put a nickname for yourself on here. And then we just have a few questions to get to know you. All right, good. People are joining in. We have a lot of fun with these. We hope you do too. Give people a little bit of time to get signed in. This one is not a timed type of quiz where there's right or wrong answers. Everybody is a winner and correct today. This is just getting to know you. So if that was intimidating you, you've been to these Kahoots before where you have to be fast and you have to be right. This isn't one of those. We just want to hear more about you. Vancouver participating.
Nice.
Excellent. All right, looks like most people who want to join are in. If you are not in yet but want to join, I put the pin in the chat so you can join at any point. But let's go ahead and get our questions started here. All right. We want to know you a little bit better. So this is all going to be related to this meeting or to the current season. So just a little bit of preview of what we're talking about. What are you enjoying about fall so far? Got a couple of different options here. Maybe you're liking more than one thing, but which of these things do you enjoy the most? And if fall's not really your thing, there's an option for you too. That's the purple option. Hopefully nobody's feeling bah humbug. All right. Oh, lots of people liking the cool weather. That kind of surprises me. That is one of the things I least like about fall. It reminds me how quickly winter is coming. Some people enjoying the leaves, a little bit for the apples. Somebody's glad their kids are back in school. That's pretty funny. Oh, we do have a bah humbug person. Well, maybe some of these ideas will inspire you to go get something pumpkin spice or an apple or something. Okay, that was nice. Next question. This one you can choose more than one answer. So Andrew is going to be talking to us shortly about something he does related to textiles and data. And so we want to know, do any of you have similar hobbies? And it's okay if the answer is none, but sorry, what was that, Brandy?
I just said this is a multi-select, so you
It is
have
multi-select. Yep. Feel free to say more than one if it applies. All right. Most people none. Okay, but we do have some crocheters out there. That is really cool. Some cross stitchers, sewing. Nobody knits. Huh. That surprises me. If I were going to pick up a textile hobby, which I don't currently have, I feel like knitting would be the one I would start with. So now I'm wondering, maybe that's a bad pick. Maybe I'll start with crocheting instead and see if some of you can help me out. Okay, next question. Wanting to know if you all build data dashboards and how prolific are you at building those dashboards? Do you build a few, a lot, a whole lot, or maybe none at all on average? Okay, most of you are building at least one, maybe up to 3. We've got a really prolific person who does 10 or more. I am so impressed. And a few of you who aren't building any at all. Very interesting. All right, and then our final question. Have you yourself used a custom background in Tableau? Tammy is going to be showing us an example of one that she used. Okay, most of you haven't, but sounds like you maybe have some plans too. Hopefully this session today will inspire you to get out there and use some of those custom backgrounds and add a little more flair and a little more context to your vizzes. Fantastic. Thank you for participating in that. And
Thanks,
I'll turn it back over to you, Tammy. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, just a couple of really quick announcements before we get to Andrew's presentation. Our TUG roadmap, so November 16th, the Milwaukee TUG will have a virtual meeting. December will be the Madison TUG. They will, I think they're going to go virtual just because it's December. And then we'll circle back around to the Wisconsin TUG in January on a date still to be announced. So keep that in. So keep those dates are full. There's not really any dates. Just keep that in mind that those are coming. But before we go on any further, I just wanted to throw out a leadership call. The Wisconsin Tableau user group is always looking for volunteers to join the leadership team. But we really would like to get some new leaders on our team soon. So the time commitment is no more than a couple of hours a month. We have one meeting a month where all of the leaders get together. It's usually the first Thursday of the month at noon Central Time. So if you're interested, send a message in the chat. You can put it in the regular chat or just send it to the presenters during this meeting, or reach out to me at any time, tammy.brown@tdstelecom.com, and we can give you more information about what you would be biting off if you decided to join us. It's not a huge commitment, so if you're interested, please let us know as soon as possible. Okay, so our first presenter is Adam Hahn. Andrew has been creating maps and data visualizations professionally for 7 years. As newsroom developer at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, he works with the newspaper's investigations team to create engaging interactive graphics for the web. While working toward a Master's of Science in Cartography, Andrew began using crochet and GIS data to create textile maps out of yarn and believes texture can be a valuable tool for data visualization designers. Andrew's presentation will walk through his process for creating textile objects from data and tell us why that process is important for digital designers to understand. And I will let you take it away, Andrew.
Thank you. Let me get my slides up here. Okay, can everybody see me okay?
Yep.
Looks good. Okay. So yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm always so excited to talk about one of my favorite nerdy little hobbies, which is crocheting maps. We're also going to talk a little bit about like texture in general and how I got into crocheting maps and why I crochet maps and like what it could mean for us as digital data visualization developers as well. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about myself a little bit and how I got into this. We're going to walk through creating a crochet pattern in a software called QGIS I have used as a companion with Tableau for my entire career. And then we're going to talk about texture and lessons that we can learn from crocheting data visualization as things for the web. So, like Tammy said, I am the newsroom developer at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. I work on our investigations team. So most of my work is about visualizing the results of some of our investigations. I've worked here for about a year, and previous to that, I worked for 6 years at the University of Wisconsin-Madison as primarily a Tableau developer. I made print and web graphics with Tableau to support the admissions, financial aid, and health services teams. I am a cartographer. Officially just got my master's degree in cartography like last week. We're pretty excited about that. And I've been fascinated with maps as an academic subject for a long time. I wanted to mention that because some of the ways that I'll justify the decisions that I recommend in crocheting maps or in making maps for the web come from some of that academic background that we'll talk about. And I've been knitting and crocheting for most of my life. I learned how to knit when I was 11 years old. My mom taught me. Pretty tedious thing for an 11-year-old to spend time doing. I picked up crocheting in college alongside my grandmother, and I've been doing that ever since. And now I'm teaching my mom how to knit, and she is working on her first blanket. So I also have like a little Kahoot thing for us. I just wanted to get a sense of people's comfortable levels with the subject. If folks could open a new tab and go to menti.com and enter this code, I have just a couple of questions to see if anybody has the same kind of professional interests as me. I'm going to share this tab instead. And now we can see the quiz results. So this first question is a sliding scale with these tools that I'm going to talk about a little today. Assuming there's going to be some people comfortable with Tableau in the room. QGIS is a lot of people refer to it as the free version of ArcGIS. Both of them are geographic information systems, and they allow us to display and edit and visualize geographic data sets. So it looks like, give people a moment to get in here. The code is at the top of the screen and at the bottom left corner if you're not in yet. But it looks like QGIS is new to a lot of people, as is ArcGIS. The reason I put ArcGIS on there, although we won't talk about it today, is that they're very similar tools. One just looks like the open source version of the other. Awesome. So I'm going to go to the next question I had. Jen and I had the same thought. So I was just going to ask, and you know, Jen had a few on there that I forgot. So pick the closest one if you maybe loom, weave, or something like that. Got some crocheters. I'm surprised because like knitting seems like it has the internet on lock. When people talk about like yarn arts, it seems like they're talking about knitting, but a lot of people love crochet like me. So I'm glad that there's at least a few crocheters in the room. And new to a lot of people, and we'll talk about what that means for digital tools as well. I'm going to go on to the last slide here. My last little question is just to invite you to name some textures. So we're going to be talking a lot about texture, both visual texture in a digital setting and like touch texture on an actual crocheted item. Yeah, velvet. So like a lot of times, especially in the cartography world, sometimes people use food words to describe textures. Like I've seen maps described as crispy and buttery and smooth and ice cream. These are all words that I've heard used to describe data visualizations and maps before. And so I think just like getting in the habit of thinking of some of these words. I like wood grain a lot, sandpaper. I think getting the habit of like having these words in our head is gonna give us a little bit of a better place to describe some of the data visualizations that we're gonna see and talk about today. Leathery, cabled. Yeah, these are great. Bumpy, soft, rough, and smooth are like, they're the most common ones on here, and definitely ones that are going to come up both in a crocheted item and in a digital data visualization the most. That's awesome. Okay, I am going to go back to my slides and make sure that worked. Okay, thank you for indulging my little quiz. What are crochet maps? On the right here, I have one of my first little proof of concept maps. This was just a test to see if you could have a point, polygon, line, vector data as a crocheted item. Also experimented with the text here a little bit. And it worked really well. And it got me thinking, this was just like a little like pan holder thing that I made. But it got me thinking about how we could actually use this as a method of visualization on a larger scale. Here's a map that I've been talking about for a while now, a crochet depth map of Lake Mendota. And I was inspired by the wood map that you see on the right. That's hanging in Memorial Union on campus at UW-Madison. And it's so inviting. It's magnetic. You can drag little like boat magnets to it. You can touch it. You can feel the steepness or smoothness of the depth of Lake Mendota. And it's just a really fascinating physical object to have on the wall. So I grabbed some bathymetry data. I made a pattern out of it that you see on the bottom right, and we'll talk about how I did that in a minute. And you see on the bottom right that depth here is encoded with color. So it's a low resolution map. 1 stitch equals 1 square, 1 pixel. And but more than color, I wanted to have that same physical experience of moving down into the lake as you move from the coastline to the center of the lake. And so I decided to crochet this, not just changing the colors, but actually changing the layers. This is actually 4 layers of yarn worked on top of each other, each worked into the layer below. And it turned out pretty cool. I think this is like an interesting way of representing terrain, in this case, bathymetry. I think the next test for me will be to do something additive rather than subtractive and try to do a mountain or something. Lots of other people are doing really cool things with fiber maps. Victoria Rose Richards is a great follow. She does embroidery to represent aerial imagery of the English countryside where she lives. And embroidery is such a perfect medium for that, that sometimes she's shared a zoomed in image and I thought I was looking at a photo at first because the tiny little texture of the individual fibers looks so much like vegetation. I think yarn and thread are a perfect medium to represent land cover for that reason. So we're gonna look at another land cover project in a second. Alyssa Fowers is a graphics reporter at the Washington Post. She just put out this really fun story this summer. She took some data from Ravelry, the social media site for yarn crafts, and visualize that data with yarn, with crochet. And so there's a story, and I'll link to it at the end of my presentation, that's full of crocheted bar charts and line charts and things like that. That was really fun to read. Lots of people here might be familiar with a temperature blanket, or in this case, a temperature scarf. This is data encoded with yarn. This is the average temperature for each day of a year encoded as the color of a row of this thing. So you can see winter to summer to winter again. And less elegantly, this TikTok went viral this year. A TikToker used the same methodology to chart her own regularity. And that is another example of using data, encoding data with yarn. So I want to talk a little bit about how I make these patterns. And in doing so, I want to introduce people to QGIS. Tableau is a geographic information system. It can take geospatial data sets, it can visualize them, it lets you interact with them, and it's a really powerful way to present information. But sometimes you need to clean up your data first, and that is where we need something a little more powerful like QGIS. It's open source, it's free, it's a little clunky, but it gets the job done. And it takes data sets, just like Tableau, in terms of points, lines, and polygons. Points, lines, and polygons are usually represented as vectors. You can see those on the left column of this image. They have infinite resolution, which makes them great for digital applications. They're not great for physical applications like a crocheted map. For that, we're going to talk about raster data on the right. Raster data can show all the same features that vector data can show, but it displays it as pixels. So raster images are images. Raster data sets are images where each pixel corresponds to a value. We need QGIS to go back and forth between vector and raster formats before we load it into Tableau. This is what QGIS looks like. I'm just going to give you a quick tour of the visual interface to make it a little less scary. The layers panel is where your data sets live. When you drag data into QGIS, it will show up as a layer there. The browser panel is your interface for connecting to servers and databases or just folders on your computer to grab data. The map panel is where your data shows up and where you can like visually interact with it just like you would with any web map. And the processing toolbox is the most powerful part of QGIS and also the scariest. But getting good at QGIS just means knowing a little bit about what's in this box. Each thing in this toolbox is a Python script on the back end that manipulates your data in some way. It doesn't require any coding knowledge because each tool opens up a wizard and you just define the inputs and it will spit the output into your layers panel. There's a million things in here and I know what maybe a fourth of them do. And I consider myself pretty good at QGIS. So you can spend a lifetime learning what's in here. We're only going to use a couple of the tools in here to do our pattern making today. So I want to get back to land cover. Land cover, like I said, is something that is so perfect to visualize with texture. So I went and grabbed some land cover data set, and this is what it looks like. Each pixel value on here is coded as a number from 0, meaning completely black, to 255, meaning completely white. And the levels of that value correspond to land use categories like forest or agriculture or urban areas. This is the right format of data that we need to make a crochet map, but it is way, way, way too high a resolution. If I crocheted this at the resolution I like to crochet at, which is 1 stitch per pixel, this would be millions and millions of stitches. So we're going to first use a tool from the processing toolbox. We can export this data set as a lower resolution version of the same image. So on this wizard that pops up to the left, again, QGIS is all no code. We can define a resolution. And in this case, the resolution that I defined was 60 rows and 60 columns. And that is going to correspond to a crocheted object that is 60 stitches long and 60 rows. Single crochet stitches are roughly square enough that you can get away with it. So this is great. This is now a size that we can actually crochet, but it's really messy. You can see that if I crocheted this now, I would be changing colors every single stitch. Not a fun way to crochet, and also not really meaningful to interact with as a reader. It would be really confusing to try to touch different textures when it's this jumbled up, and it would be really visually overwhelming to look at it this way. Instead, what we want to see is large areas of the predominant land use type. So we know that up in the northern part of the state, a lot of this is forest, and we see a lot of pixels there that are not forest, but we want to just show the predominant land use. There's a tool for that. We're going to use the fill stats tool. And what the fill stats tool does is it performs a calculation on every pixel of your raster. And it says for each pixel, look at all the pixels around it and reassign this pixel the value of the majority of all of these. So if most of these pixels around it are forest, this pixel is now going to also be forest. And in that way, we can smooth out our land cover quite a bit and create something that we could actually perceive and crochet. In this case, the white corresponds to forested areas. The gray in the bottom right corner corresponds to mostly agricultural use areas. And then the lighter gray areas are wetlands. This is how I made my pattern. We need to do one final thing to clean this up in order to make it a workable crochet pattern. And that is to actually be able to see the individual pixels. I need to count stitches when I'm crocheting something. And this is something where now the usefulness of the raster is no longer there. We need a vector data set. So we're going to use one final tool from the QGIS toolbox, which is the polygonize tool. What that tool does is it takes every pixel of the raster image and converts it into a square, into a vector square, and encodes it with the data. And so now we can actually symbolize it with colors. And this is the point where I would load this into Tableau to make a really nice looking crochet pattern. This is now something where we could add things like labeling the rows with the row number. We could label the first row of stitches with the stitch number from right to left as crochet is usually worked. And you can define maybe with a label the actual stitch that you want to use. I was not yet convinced that this was going to work. And so I just jumped right in and started crocheting. I would love to see someone better at Tableau than me, though, make a really beautiful crochet pattern, usable crochet pattern using Tableau. So I got started. I took this picture when I learned that I was going to be giving this presentation, and we'll see. I wanted to finish it by the time I gave the presentation. You'll see how far I got in a second. You can see that it's perfect for encoding raster data, because look at my hook there and see that I'm creating one stitch at a time from right to left, just like a raster image is loaded one pixel at a time from right to left. I can change colors between pixels, and I can overlay stitches on top of each other to create texture. So here's how far I got. pretty admirable, I think. I got almost up to Appleton. And I want to talk about my favorite part of this process now, which is choosing the yarn and stitches for a crochet map. You can see in the other areas on the state on the left, used a very neutral color and no texture. There is no distinguishable direction that you can feel when you're feeling that. I wanted that to fade into the background. On the far right, we have Lake Michigan. I wanted Lake Michigan to feel regularly bumpy, just like you might associate with the waves of Lake Michigan. And the agricultural area in the bottom right corner of the map, I used this variegated yarn that had the colors of, that reminded me of agricultural products in Wisconsin, like corn and soybeans and cranberries. And I used the stitch that leaves a ridge, these horizontal, regularly spaced ridges that reminded me of crop rows. For the forested areas, not looking like much now, I'm going to go over the top of it at the end and add this, it's called a bobble stitch over the top. I got that out of a stitch dictionary, and to me it looks like a canopy of trees if it were green. And so hopefully that will immediately make clear what that green area is. So we'll have to wait a little bit to see the finished product. This is one use of texture in data visualization. I want to turn now to talking about some digital applications and like, why would a Tableau developer who doesn't crochet or knit care about this? Texture in data visualization texture has been used for data visualization for as long as data visualizations have existed. Jacques Bertrand defined in the 60s these visual variables, these variables that you can associate with data to make a data visualization. And you might recognize some of these from directly the interface of Tableau. It's interesting how these have lasted directly into the GUI interface of Tableau when you drag something to the color box or you drag something to the size box. Texture isn't one of those natively, but you can combine the visual variables that Tableau does support to create interesting textures for your chart. In the past, data visualization was done with ink. And so all the texture that we had to use was combinations of ink and cross-hatching styles and shading styles. And that gave it texture sort of in lieu of a color, which was expensive and visually overwhelming at the time. Texture is studied primarily by cartographers for terrain representation. And back in the day, this was done literally with paint, and people would paint depth and beautiful textures. This is where cartographers started using words like buttery and crispy and umptuous to define their maps, because some artists became extremely good at defining terrain using really visually stunning textures. But as computer-assisted drafting techniques became more prevalent, we started to get stuff like this, where we're trying to use the same techniques, but now they're machined. They are computer-assisted, and they're a little flat and a little visually mucky, I think. These are from the late 70s and early 80s. And you can see that, again, we're using texture in place of color. And on the right, we're using texture just for the sake of using texture. As computers started to support 3D modeling and 3D shapes, we started to get these extruded polygon styles that persisted into the early 2000s, where the 3D texture doesn't actually encode any information. It's just there to show you a 3D shape. These are both taken from the textbook of a guy named Edward Tufte. Tufte was famous for coming up with the idea of the data to ink ratio for data visualization. He believed that the goal of a data visualization should be to encode as much data as possible with as little ink as possible. And so the term he called these charts, he coined it all one word, chart junk. And he said all of these textures that are included in things, they're chart junk, and they're not worth the ink that you use to print them. We might call more modern looking charts like this chart junk, where they have just extremely visually confusing to read colors, 3D for the sake of being 3D, things like that. And this is the kind of chart that when you go, that Tableau will teach you to avoid, because there's no intention behind the height of this. And so today, I'd argue this is where we are. This is what a lot of my dashboards, when I make dashboards in Tableau, look like. I assume this is what a lot of dashboards you make look like. And it's a great dashboard. It has a great data to ink ratio. It's clear. There's nothing unnecessary on the page. And you can see a little bit of texture used in that line chart in the middle. But overall, texture on the web today doesn't exist. We interpret everything through our screens, and our screens deliver us clarity. They give us clarity of shape, clarity of comparison in that bar chart. And I'd argue this is a little flat. This is the artistry is a little lost. And so if you'll allow me to wax poetic about data visualization for a second, I'd like to walk through some charts that are digital and flat, technically, but use depth and texture to strengthen the points that they're trying to make as data visualizations. Some of these I took from the Viz of the Day in the past couple months on Tableau Public. This is the films of Christopher Nolan. It illustrates a point I want to make that I think in the past, we used to talk about texture in a 2D way, as combinations of ink and cross-hatching and things. But today, texture looks more like gradients and transparency on the web than ink. Like this one uses a great job of using the gradient from the center to the edge to encode information about the length and quality of that movie or earnings of that movie. This one is a hierarchical network diagram of movies. This uses transparency around each movie point, not to encode information, but to give it a 3D light effect, and you get this constellation effect from this chart that supports its message. And so, although you could argue this is the same thing as texture for its own sake, it visually supports the point that the authors of this visualization is trying to make, which I think turned out really cool. This is not Tableau. This is taken from a blog post that, again, I'll link to at the end. Zan Armstrong argues for us to stop aggregating away the signal in our data. And what he's talking about is that, so usually you might visualize a lot data set as an average over time or something like that, which gives you a story, but it aggregates away some of the nuance of your data set that could be a really interesting part of your story. And this example does it with texture. You can see in the first quarter chart on the left, a very firm texture, very close, very little uncertainty in the values throughout the day. The second quarter is a very loose texture, much more uncertainty on any given day throughout whatever metric this is charting. And then the others you can see too. So these are small marks overlaid on top of each other with a little bit of transparency. And the ultimate effect, the way you read it, is through texture. I'd argue this is a texture encoded data visualization. Here's an example of taking that principle and bringing it into Tableau. So the conventional wisdom might say that we should just make a bar chart of these medians here, and that would be the clearest way to show this. And maybe that's true. But for each category, what this developer, Dan Shepard, has decided to do instead is show the actual rows of the data, give them some transparency, and overlay them on top of each other, scattered a little bit in the x-axis direction. And what that creates is this cloud texture, this cloud effect that thematically supports the point of the visualization, which is about tree equity and air quality for children. And I think it does it really powerfully. And it also shows more information than just a bar chart of the medians would. So I've got a couple takeaways that hopefully I have convinced you of. First, I hope everyone's excited to help me make the internet less flat and to incorporate textures into your data visualizations. Second, I hope I've made you a little curious about QGIS as a pre-processing step for Tableau. Although it's rare to work in a dashboard setting with raster data, QGIS has a lot of options in it for working with vector data that is very commonly used to make maps in Tableau. And finally, I hope I've convinced you that fiber maps are unique, beautiful, and educational for us as data visualization designers. And I hope to see some more data visualization yarn art in the world. So that's all I have. I'm sticking around for questions. And if you would like to read any of the articles that I referenced, as well as some others and some other great yarn artists to follow, there's a bit.ly link at the bottom to a document that has all of that on it. So that's it. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A. I think I'm going to ask one of them now and save one for the Q&A panel at the end of the meeting. So I'll ask one now. Andrew, have you used Mapbox within Tableau? If so, what are your thoughts? That's a question from Brandy.
I have not. I have made maps with Mapbox and I have made maps with Tableau, and I have not used the two in the same project. And so I don't know about all of the options. I'm a big fan of Mapbox in general, though, and the way I typically interact with Mapbox is through JavaScript for my job. But I spend a lot of time making base maps in Mapbox Studio that would be pretty sick to use in a Tableau dashboard.
Sure. All right, Brady, we're going to get to your question at the end, so I will make sure that we ask it. To keep us on time, though, I want to move on to our next speaker, and we will come back. Andrew, that was fascinating. I was like glued to my monitor. That was so cool. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. So our next presenter is Colleen Hayes. Colleen is a highly organized senior data consultant with nearly 20 years of experience in data engineering, data transformation, reporting, and visualization. She has experience working in the legal and manufacturing industries. Passionate about problem solving, she is highly skilled in Snowflake, Alteryx, Tableau, SQL, and PowerShell. She has led global scale projects building out solutions in data governance, data warehousing, and developed executive level reporting that influenced decision making. She is also currently the co-leader of the Milwaukee Alteryx user group. So Colleen, I will give you the floor.
Awesome. Thanks for that intro, Tammy. So for my presentation today, instead of putting together a PowerPoint, I, of course, put together a Tableau visualization. So let me share that real quick. All right, Tammy, will you just let me know if you can see this?
Okay. Sorry, I was muted. Yes, you're good.
All right. So anyway, yeah, the presentation for today is labeled my Viz-a-Month project. And actually, that's sort of the end of a culmination of my sort of Tableau skills timeline, right? Since I've discovered Tableau, my most recent project is to challenge myself to publish a visualization once a month to Tableau Public. But I sort of wanted to step back a little bit and talk about how I got there and sort of what led me to where I am in my Tableau practice at this point. And so, like I said, I created a Tableau Public to sort of cover that. So my journey really starts back in 2016. I had worked with data for probably 20 years. I'm a big SQL user. Going back so far as 2005, I was tasked with getting rid of the crystal reports that we had at the organization where I was working and replace them with Microsoft SQL reports. So that's how far back my data skills go. But in about 2016, I saw a tool online called Tableau, and I thought it looked really cool. But I was really quite honest with myself and realized the organization where I was never going to invest in something like that, but I wanted to learn how to use it anyway. Actually, I should go back here one. So in 2017, I ended up changing jobs and working for a company that bought Tableau. And what we did at that time is they purchased licenses for many users in my company and paid for a little bit of Tableau training. But at the end of the day, I had these managers that I reported to that had really, really grand aspirations as far as some cool things we could do with Tableau. And I was just as excited as they were. I just didn't yet have the skill set to support those initiatives. And so I started to Google. I was sort of left in a spot where our budget had been used for the year. We had just bought all these licenses. We just paid for a block of training for everyone. And I really didn't have anything else to rely on. So I started to Google things. And that's when I actually found the Milwaukee Tableau user group first. That's the one that's local to me. And then through my involvement with them and going to meetings, I found the Madison TUG and the Wisconsin TUG. So I would say if you find yourself anywhere in your Tableau journey, whether you're a new user or you've been using it for years, definitely check out user groups that are local to you. As well as there's some other groups too that are just really cool. I know there's like a LGBTQ group. There are some for like women in data. And a lot of them have virtual meetings. And so I would just encourage you to attend as many of the meetings as you can. The virtual ones are great, but I also have found that when you go to a user group in person, it's those conversations that you have kind of offhand while you're just sort of networking or standing around or at the happy hour afterward, where I've gotten to conversations that really, literally people were like, oh, I've done that. Let me show you how to do that. Or just heard some really interesting projects that other people are working on that really have come to benefit me in some kind of unexpected ways. So I presume you're all here and you know the value of user groups, but just wanted to call that out. In about 2018, I was tasked with becoming the Tableau server administrator for the company I worked for. And that presented some new problems for me. Basically, by that point, we had been using Tableau as an organization for about 1.5 years, but we didn't really have any business rules behind it. And what that meant is we had a lot of stale content. We had a lot of users that weren't regularly using Tableau. And I was at a loss as to what we do about that. We didn't have any certified data process. We had people who were just publishing data sources that may very well have already existed out there and may have been a subset of data or something that wasn't really clearly defined what it exactly was connected, what the data source was. So I got to a point where, again, I was kind of stuck, right? Like the Tableau community, I'm sure you've each found it, but if you haven't, do some Googling. The Tableau community is great. And if you have a technical issue, like how to do a certain thing, I found I can Google and find a solution pretty quickly. But when it comes to sort of this bigger, higher level stuff, I wasn't really sure what to do. And actually, I just reached out to some of those connections I had made previously at those user groups to say, hey, what did you do in this instance? And I have to give Brandy Beals a shout out here because she was one, she spent a lot of time with me. I bought her a cup of tea one day and just picked her brain about how at her organization, they put rules in place to sort of enforce certain things. Like at what point is it acceptable to just revoke a license from somebody if they're not using it? Or at what point do you, start to delete data sources from your servers if they're not being used. And so I probably owe her another 100 cups of tea for her insight and expertise there. But I just encourage you to reach out to some of those people that you may already know when it comes to things like this and just sort of ask to pick their brain about things that might be top of mind to you. That brings us to 2020 in what I call my fancy pandemic dashboards era. What that means for me is that I was working for an organization at the time, and of all things, they wanted to have a dashboard that managers could go to see if people were actually working and putting in work hours from home. I will let you form your own opinions as to whether or not that's a useful way to spend one's time. But it was a task that I had assigned to me, and it was something I needed to create and very quickly. And again, it was asking to be, there was some technology that would benefit being incorporated into that dashboard that I just wasn't very comfortable with, that I didn't have a lot of experience in. And so I, again, went back to Google and I found a dashboard that somebody created in response to a Makeover Monday exercise. And that person had used this this functionality, I should say, within their Tableau dashboard as their response to a Makeover Monday exercise, that I was able to then kind of reverse engineer to figure out how they had created that. And so it was at that point in my career, I really started to see there's some great platforms out there where people are doing great work and publishing them so that people can kind of work along in tandem. And so Makeover Monday actually, sadly, is just coming to an end. I see that this week, Andy Kriebel has recorded his last one, but there's still a wealth of information out there. If you're not familiar with it, give it a Goog. You'll find years worth of data sets out there and the data visualizations that he has created along with those data sets. And then there's a lot of dashboards and things that have been published to Tableau Public, where people did go through those Makeover Monday scenarios and just kind of come up with their own data visualizations, their own spin on that same data set. Workout Wednesday is something similar. There was another group of folks that put together a dashboard. This one's different in that they offer both Power BI and Tableau. But it's a similar thing where they publish a data visualization on Wednesday. And the challenge there is to try and recreate that as closely as possible. I'll also say it was probably about this point in my career where I started to really follow a lot of these sort of thought leaders, these Tableau thought leaders on LinkedIn and on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it now, and really started to, subscribe to their newsletters and really learn sort of these meatier, really cool features of Tableau that I maybe didn't have a chance to incorporate into my own work in the past. And so I'll just give a couple shout outs to people that I found very useful to follow over the years. Andy Kriebel is one. I mentioned him with Makeover Monday, but he's also got a newsletter that he publishes once a week. It just goes to your inbox and he just covers some really cool Tableau features or some unique ways that he's used those features. I found that very useful. The Flurledge twins, if you don't know of them, there are two brothers that both work in data visualization and are highly involved in Tableau. So I follow them on social media, and the Milwaukee Tableau user group did a really great presentation with them. I think it was in June, where they came in to do some tips and tricks and do a presentation that they gave at the Tableau conference this year. So there is a recording of that out there if that's something you're interested in. And I will also say Ryan Sleeper too, like he's published, I don't remember the name of his book, but he's got some great content out on social media on a regular basis. So if there's things that you're looking to learn how to do, I always kind of think of this as like, I'm not going to recreate the wheel. I'm going to see what the cool kids are already doing. And I'm going to see if I can either reverse engineer that or figure out a way to learn that myself. So all of that is to say, it kind of brings me to the point where I am in my Tableau journey now, and that I'd love to try out these cool tricks that I've seen people doing all these years. And so that led me to this project that is sort of the source for all of this, where I challenged myself to come up with a different Tableau public visualization for every month of the year. And I will admit I am behind on my own challenge. And I'm really calling myself out by doing this presentation today because I'm basically in June. Like I've done 6 of them this year. I'm just going to show you kind of a higher view. This is one of my Tableau public data visualizations. I use some parameters here and like little custom graphics as these buttons up at the top. And I actually, after I gave this presentation to the Milwaukee Tableau user group back in May, I went and added some content down here so that people could kind of get the presentation without having been at the presentation. So this is kind of like a Cliff's Note version of what I've talked about so far today. I'm just going to go back and take a look at my profile here. Here's one that's a work in progress at the moment, so I'm going to skip that one. Most of these are fun. They're visualizations that on topics that I just have interest in. This one here is about Wisconsin state parks. I'm a big fan of state parks. I like to hike a lot. And so I started my own personal goal to go to each one of the Wisconsin state parks. And so you'll see my key here is that if the dot is gray, I've been there. And if it's green, I ain't been there. The dots represent the state parks, and the trees are state forests. If you hover over the dots, I also have an image in there of the state parks that I've been to. And then there is no image for the ones I have not yet gotten to. Same thing with the forests. Just kind of a little fun thing I decided to do. And all of the other, I think, bonus to Tableau Public is that any one of you can come to my Tableau Public page, download this, and you'll see what I used, all the different calculations and things. How did I get these images to pop in there, for example? I haven't been to Newport State Park, but you can download this and kind of get the behind the scenes view of how this was created. Here's my Tableau journey. This was another fun one. I'm not sure why this isn't clickable after I arrow back, but I went to opening day, the Milwaukee Brewers opening day this year. And I'd never been before because in my impression, I just always thought it was so cold and the weather was so crappy. And really it was about 60 degrees at the time of the first pitch. And so I put together this little data visualization. I went on a little nerdy rabbit hole where I went and looked up the high temperature in Milwaukee for opening day of the Brewers for every opening day going all the way back to 1970. That's what's in this data visualization here. And then there's a couple little call outs. So like the color coded based on whether they won or lost. And the length of the bar is the temperature. So in 2010 on April 5th, the high temperature in Milwaukee was 71 degrees and they beat the Cubs 4-3. The little Brewer gloves or the logos are just kind of indicate where there was an anomaly with opening day. So in 2020, opening day was postponed until August, and then they played to an empty stadium. They did win against the Cardinals 5-4, and the high temp in August was 67. Anyway, you could go through this a little bit more. I also have some little visualizations over here on the side. This one here happens to be a bar chart behind a graphic that is transparent to show the percentage of games that the Brewers have won, or the percentage of times the Brewers have won their game on opening day. So they've won just over half of their opening day games. I did one with my resume. That seems to be a very popular thing. It's kind of, I equated it to taking journalism 101 where you write your obituary. I feel like the resume is the data visualization that everybody does when they're sort of starting off. You get an opportunity to use a little color, to have some graphics and some images in there. And you obviously know the content quite well. So this doesn't render super well on this monitor, but you can talk. I can see I've got a little bar chart over here about my skills, contact information, my different certifications, education. There's some really cool ones out there. If you haven't gone to look at Tableau Public in the resume category, I mean, it's outstanding what some people do. It's really, really, really cool. And probably one of the first real creative ones I did was with regard to my Goodread history. So I read a lot. I like to read fiction. Not sure why this isn't loading here. But I downloaded all my Goodreads data and just did a little data visualization about the types of books I read, how long they are, how old the books are. The longest book, first audiobook, the oldest book I've read. Yeah. Here's about long books. Of course, Stephen King's The Shining was the longest. A lot. I think there's a few from Stephen King in here. The Outsiders of Stephen King. And then my oldest one that I have out here is this one from January. I worked out how to use sets. That was a little tricky thing for me to learn. And I just kind of did a little tutorial to walk people through how you would create sets. And the scenario I found myself in when I realized I needed to use a set, I knew enough to know that I could benefit from using a set, but I really wasn't sure how they worked. And so it just sort of walks through a scenario, a sample scenario with some dummy data here to say, here's the situation. I was trying to show sales from the last 3 years for fictitious customers, but rank them by the top companies with sales from 2022. So I couldn't use a filter. I couldn't, if I filtered just by the top 5 from 2022, I would lose the sales from 2020 and 21. So I won't walk through all of this, but I just put little graphics in here to walk people through each step of this and to explain what's happening at each step. So it's not my most polished looking data visualization by any means, but it was the first one I created as part of this project. I am working on a data validation dashboard. It's something I did for a company I worked at years ago, and it was something that we found very valuable, and I just haven't had the time to commit to getting that one done yet, sadly. So yeah, I mean, I guess all of this is to say that, you know, I'm using this project to spend a little bit more time doing things that I might not be able to use in my professional day-to-day life because I'm not familiar with them. Like this one using sets. I spent the time to sit down and create a fictitious scenario so I knew how to use them, and it wasn't going to take me a week to figure it out. This data viz here about my Tableau journey uses some parameters, and I wasn't great with parameters. And so I always had found myself in the past thinking, okay, this might be a really good scenario to use a parameter, but I didn't have the luxury of time to like work through the technicalities of that. And so this project is my way to sort of learn how to do those things more comfortably so I can apply them otherwise. So some of these look, you know, a little simplistic, and I will completely admit this like little dips and bumps in this chart are completely made up for the purposes of making it look interesting. But I was really trying to hone my Tableau skills by doing this. So that's about it for my presentation. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to speak.
Awesome, Colleen. Thank you. We actually have 2 questions in the Q&A that I'm going to save for the panel at the end. So Natasha and Laura, we will get to your questions. They're really good questions, but we'll save them for the Q&A. So next up, Jen, would you like to do the introduction? Or I'm sorry, Brandy's doing it. I'm sorry.
I'm all ready to introduce our next speaker, which is the wonderful Tammy Brown, who has been leading the meeting so far today. Tammy is not only a member of the leadership team, but she's a lead data analyst for TDS Telecom, which is a broadband provider in 38 US states based in Madison, Wisconsin. She began learning Tableau upon being hired at TDS in 2018, quickly found a passion for the ability of Tableau to display data and visualizations that removed the layers of millions of rows of data where everyone came to their own conclusions of what the data said. She likes to dabble with fun ways to present boring data, which led her to her presentation today. Tableau can do that using Tableau to map baseball statistics. She lives in Janesville, Wisconsin, with her husband, Tim, and her cats, Nacho and Queso. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, don't forget to use the Q&A. And if you have any questions about Nacho and Queso, I'm sure Tammy will address those as well. So take it away, Tammy.
Thank you, Brandy. I'm surprised that neither one of them has hopped up on their perch back here because I see there's fresh catnip on it. I thought maybe they'd be joining us, but thank you for that great introduction. This Tableau user group, the Wisconsin Tableau user group, has started a series called Tableau Can Do That. So it's just bringing interesting things that you can do with Tableau. And this exercise that I'm going to demonstrate for you was actually inspired by Ryan Sleeper's book that Colleen mentioned, Ryan Sleeper. His first book, Practical Tableau. In order to train myself on how to use Tableau, I was learning things at work, but I wanted to learn faster. I took Ryan's book and I went through it chapter by chapter, and I did the exercises that he demonstrated. Learned some really cool things. One of them is how to use special backgrounds for mapping. You all I'm sure everyone or most everyone is familiar with a scatter plot. So usually, so maps can be thought of as a scatter plots with background images. That's all they really are. So to illustrate that, here's a view of sales by state from the Tableau Superstore dataset. We have the latitude and the longitude of states plotted with no background map, but you can, and then the circles represent sales from the Superstore data set. So you can see how it resembles the layout of the United States. The latitude and longitude are on the X and Y axis, but without the background map, it looks very much just like a standard scatter plot. So if we add a background image of the United States, we see the exact same data points plotted on a map. Out of the box, Tableau includes map images for this type of mapping visualization. But did you know that you can map anything you like? So to prove that I am not at all salty about how the Milwaukee Brewers season ended this year, and thanks for that great segue, Colleen, I'll demonstrate how to create a map of Brewers baseball hitting percentages from the 2023 season. So you can use literally any image for a background map. It needs to be either square or rectangular because you need to put some coordinates on X and Y axes. I don't know if it needs to be square or rectangular, but those work the best. And I needed an image of the Brewers baseball diamond. So I just went out to Google Images and I downloaded one that was going to fit my needs for what I was trying to do. You need to use the resize option to resize your image so that I wanted to make mine square just for simplicity's sake. So I just used the resize option to make it 500 pixels by 500 pixels. And then once the image is resized, you have to make sure that resizing it didn't change the quality of the image because that can happen sometimes. So in order to use this as a map, we need to plot some X and Y coordinates. So we need to create a data set that has X coordinates and Y coordinates. And since my image is 500 by 500, my X coordinate is at 500. My Y coordinate is also at 500. And then you need to have the points that you want to plot. So in my case, it's player position. So I have all of the positions listed for a Major League Baseball team. So that's what the data set looks like to start. I always just start and temporarily stop there so that I connect it to a Tableau to make sure that the image will work. So I just started a Tableau workbook and connected to the data set. And then you need to add the image of the baseball field to the sheet. So to do that, you start a sheet within the workbook, do background images. I'm going to tag it to sheet 1, which is one I'm on. And then it brings up a dialog box from which I can choose my background image. So I just I click on browse and bring it in here. Very important, this part is to designate the length of the X and the Y axes. And again, since mine is 500 left by 500 or 500 across by 500 up, those are the coordinates that we have in the image setup. So then the image will when you hit OK, the image will automatically pop up on your sheet. You'll have X, it automatically puts the X and the Y axes on the columns and rows, just like if you were doing a geographic, clicking on a geographic field in your data set, it would put it up there and create a map, a custom, a generic map for you. So I have the X on columns and the Y field on rows, and my image fits nicely within the sheet. So I verify that the axes are both fixed at the maximum X and Y values, which is consistent with the pixel size of the image, 500 by 500 in this case. So next I want to quickly jump over to to my Tableau workbook. So when we get to how do we put where all the where everything goes on this map? So what we have to do is we have to go to we have the image on the sheet. If you right click on the position, so let's say I'm trying to figure out where the picture should go. If you right click on where the picture position would be and then hit annotate and hit point, it will create that. It'll bring up an edit and an annotation box, and I just said give me what those are, and it tells me the picture position is at 257 on the X and 255 on the Y. So I did that for all of the player positions. This one over here is the designated hitter, because there's hitting stats for that particular player, but there's not really a place on the field for them. So the catcher, the first baseman, second baseman, third baseman, all of the outfielders, the shortstop, all of those have a position on the field that now has an X and Y coordinate position. So we're going to take that and we're going to go back to our data set that we set up, and we're going to put in those X and Y coordinates. And for the purposes of doing something like this, you can drop the decimals. All you need is the whole number. So the pitcher is at 258, 251. Yep, so there's the pitcher right there. Our catcher, 288, 134. Our right field, a right field person, 402, 412. So you can see the Excel spreadsheet clip here matches up with the data on the map. So if we do that, we refresh the data set, bring that data set back into Tableau, and wrong one. Bring that data back into Tableau, refresh the data set, and it will put circles for us where all the players go. Normally in a baseball game, the players aren't always standing at the position that they're supposed to be standing at. So that's why there's players in this picture that seem to be offset from it. But you'll see that there are small circles everywhere at home plate for the catcher, on the pitcher's mound, first base, second base, third base, the three positions in the outfield, the designated hitter, and the shortstop. So we have those circles at the player position. To make them a little more obvious, I just went into the color option and I added a black border, and I chose blue to fill in the inside of the circle. So we have a map. And there's a little more that I want to add to it, which I will add to in a minute, but I just wanted to mention that you could do this with literally any kind of a map thing that you are trying to put into Tableau. I have seen people use a cubicle layout of a physical floor in the office where they work and put the cubicle layout as their image, and then put the people where the people need to go. So that there are so many endless options for doing custom map backgrounds like this in Tableau. So what I wanted to do with this to make it a little more meaningful than just where all of the players stand on a baseball diamond, I created I went out and I got the data for the hitting percentages for all of the Brewers players in 2023. I forget what year that I'm on. So I just joined those two data sets together. I related them together based on player position, because some players play more than one position at a given time. So some can be a designated hitter, but a first baseman, and some can be catcher and still play first or second base or whatever. They kind of move around. So I got all of the hitting stats by position, the number of hits and the number of runs to get, the number of at-bats and the number of hits to get a hit percentage for each player. Take that off of my Viz for a second so that you can see all of the circles went back to being small circles again. If I add hit percentage, my calculated field for hit percentage, and put that on size, if you saw, the circles changed shape. And I lost my tooltip, so I'll just go back and put that back in. for hit percentage. It changed the circles by the size. So it didn't change the circles a lot because there's not that much variability in hit percentages. I wanted to like make Christian Yelich's hit percentage like 898 or something so that it would be really obvious. But I just left it with what it was. But it changed the circles according to the batting average for each individual player. And you'll notice that there's no circle on over the pitcher because in Major League Baseball, pitchers don't bat anymore. It used to be only in the National League, and now the National League pitchers don't bat either. So there's no the circle for the pitcher disappears because there is no data. Let me move ahead. So here's how the circles change size. It's also possible to map by player. So I could have put the player in as what I wanted to have on detail, and then it would show us. I'd have to have a player filter, which if I add a player filter, and then if it cooperates with me, come on. If I add a player filter and say, okay, show me only what Christian Yelich has done. If I select just Christian Yelich, then I only get circles. Okay, it failed. So I'm not sure why it failed. So I apologize for that. But it would show a circle for Christian Yelich in left field and Christian Yelich as a designated hitter. So you could use that as a filter also. But the purpose of mine was I just used it as the actual position player. So that's how to use custom mapping backgrounds in Tableau.
That's really awesome, Tammy. Thank you so much for that.
Yep. And
I think next up is the kind of just some additional questions for all of our presenters, right, Tammy?
Yes, there are. So if we could maybe bring all of the presenters, turn your cameras back on so that we're all on screen. We can go through some of these. Brandy, do you want to take them or do you just want me to? Because I can. It doesn't matter.
I'm fine either way. If anybody has questions for Tammy or any of the other speakers that you've heard from today, get your questions in now. I just wanted to do a quick time check. We have about 15 minutes left in our meeting. And outside of just some additional Q&A, we're going to pick some winners for our giveaways from those who asked questions and those who attended. So make sure you stick around for that. But we'll just need a few minutes at the end to wrap that up. So with that, we have at least 10 minutes that we can do some Q&A. So I will kind of pose some of these questions. Let me actually start with one for Colleen. Maybe I'm selfish here, but I'm going to ask my own question, which is, how did you just decide on your color scheme? You had, obviously there were certain dashboards that you had where you used the colors for like the Milwaukee Brewers, but then there were at least 3 dashboards that I counted where you used kind of like this navy blue, like, I don't even know what that like reddish color was, a pinkish red color. And I'm curious how you came up with that color scheme.
Yeah, well, I find that I get lost in the details sometimes, and I will over things like fonts and colors. And so I didn't want to fall into that trap every time. And so I went out, there's several tools online that you can pick colors, and they'll give you the hexadecimal, equivalents for those numbers. And essentially you can pick whether you want 8 colors, 10 colors, 12, and sometimes it's like a rainbow, or they're neon colors or whatever. That one had something to do with like, I have a name for it. But it's kind of like a sunset gradient, right? Like if you imagine the sun going down the top of the sky is going to be that dark blue and then purple, and then it kind of goes to the bright kind of orangey, tannish kind of colors. And so I just really liked that one, and I decided I was going to stick with it because it kind of just looks sophisticated, I guess, a little bit. Like, it looked nice. And I just, I have several other color sets, because essentially what you do is then you just go in and you edit your Tableau. There's like a settings file, and you can just create new groups of colors and then list them all out with their hexadecimal values, and they become options in the Tableau menu when you go to edit your colors. And so I've sort of stuck with that one just because I think it looks nice. You'll notice the font at the top. The title is always like the same font too, just because I don't want to get lost in those details of like overthinking that all the time.
Yeah, I totally hear that. Cool. Well, thank you for that. Andrew, question for you from Brady. How much extra time does it take you to create a dashboard with more texture versus a more kind of stereotypical dashboard?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it depends on how you do it. A lot of times when we're talking about texture in Tableau, we're talking about like transparency or gradient, which can be added in a variety of ways. Sometimes you are just like duplicating a mark in Tableau, and so you have like two overlapping marks that mean the same thing. It just is more visually interesting because of how you style them. That's like a really easy, quick change, as long as you can justify that design decision to why you're doing it, to add a little visual interest to your map or to your dashboard. Other ones that we looked at, like we looked at the scattered box plot kind of thing on one of my examples, as opposed to just charting the median with a bar graph. They actually added the individual dots behind it. In my opinion, that would be like about the same amount of work to show the raw level, row level data as opposed to the aggregate only. It just kind of requires you to change how you're thinking about your data, less in averages and more in showing every single row of your data if you can. And that will create texture as a byproduct of the way that you've made that chart. And so whenever something looks like busy, try just decreasing the transparency on that mark a little bit and see what it looks like, and see what you would have to do to change, what else you have to change to make that more legible. I think that specific chart does require like a little calculated field to scatter things in the X direction a little bit. Lots of tutorials online about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that wonderful answer. Colleen, this next one is for you. Natasha said that I find that I start a dashboard, then get sidetracked with other work. How do you hold yourself accountable to complete your personal projects or dashboards?
Oh, that's such a good question. And it's something I clearly need to work on, because on my Tableau public, I have one that I've started and not finished, and I'm clearly behind. So if I'm doing one a month, I should have 10. I have 6. I used to be really good about like blocking time off on my calendar to do things like that, to work on projects like that. But it's, kind of ebbs and flows based on my workload. And so I have some other projects and things that I have dedicated my time to, in addition to billing full time to my client. So, which also happens to be Brandy, but I don't do so well with that sometimes. I think I overthink things a bit too. So the dashboard that I started to work on that I haven't finished yet, it's a lot more involved than, let's say, that one with the brewer temperatures and wind loss. So I put a lot more into that one than I probably needed to. I could have probably other ideas that take less time, but I sort of just need to get back on track with that. But in the past, I've found it successful to just put time on my calendar for specific activities, and that's helped me greatly. I will get back in the swing of that hopefully soon.
Well, I appreciate the honest answer. I think we all experience a lot of that. And so it's just great to hear from somebody who, is just highly engaged in the community, also kind of struggling with those same things. So appreciate the honesty. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Okay, so Andrew, this is a question for you that Tammy had shared with me outside of the Q&A here, which is, what do you do with a crocheted data piece when it's done?
Okay, this is a great question. I've been thinking about this a lot myself lately, because I don't know. It's like a beautiful thing, and then what do you do with it, right? Like, it's not a sweater. It's not I don't know. I've made pot holders before and stuff like that. So what I'm going to try with this map is on the last row, I'm going to crochet each stitch around a wooden dowel and then hang the dowel with a wire on the wall and see what that looks like. And hopefully that will be fine. And I'm also worried about something made out of yarn on the wall, like getting gross over time. I don't know. We're going to try it out and see how it works. I'm going to try to do it as a wall hanging, as like a textured wall hanging, and see what happens next. I would love to make like wearable items. My crocheted lake is a little too thick to actually be like a scarf or anything, but a flatter one with stitch texture instead of layer texture might work better for that. Anybody has an idea, put them in the chat.
Yeah. I mean, I love the kind of tapestry type of idea. I'm not sure how heavy the yarn is, but I kind of wondered like how that's gonna behave over time. That in itself becomes like also a data piece, like like an art installation. Anyway,
Yeah.
you know, just a random idea. I think, you know, here you have a captive audience of 30 data nerds, and I myself would totally be willing to like, you know, bid on something like this at like some sort of charity event. So just keep that in mind if you're ever like, I myself, you know, can't think of any like type of thing where I don't have those types of connections. But if that ever happened, and if one of your pieces were ever up for auction, let me know. Yeah.
Will do. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We have another question from Laura for Colleen. So how did you implement standards, best practices around who should be granted licenses, training, data sources, etc.? Was your organization supportive of those changes? So how after you got this like amazing advice from me, how did you?
So that, you know, it all stemmed from a place where, you know, these things cost money. Disk space, we had an on-prem server at the time, and, you know, licenses cost money. They're expensive. And so it was an initiative that was driven by the business to say, we need to sort of rein this in and really get some information around how we're utilizing these things that cost us money. And so I had pretty overwhelming support when I came back to them with recommendations saying, hey, all I really had to show was this is kind of what is the norm. Like, we're not suggesting we do anything crazy or outside the norm of what other people would do or would expect in their own environments. And as long as I sort of had done my due diligence, I was given pretty free rein to implement those things. And so it became a matter of like running a script to revoke licenses from users that hadn't logged in. I forget what the threshold was. This was a couple of years ago now. But let's say it was 90 days. If they hadn't logged in 90 days, then their license was going to get revoked. They could go back and request a license again if they found that they needed to, but we were going to free those licenses up. Same thing with disk space, data sources, things that weren't being used. We developed a process to automatically remove that, to back up that content, but then remove it from the server so that it wasn't taking up space there. So I think that those monetary attachments to those things really helped make kind of hard and fast rules about what we were going to allow and what we weren't. And then going forward, that just became the norm. So people understood that out of the gate, that their content could be archived if it wasn't being used.
Yeah. I'll add a little bit to that, Colleen. My job at TDS Telecom, one of the data sets that I work with is hundreds of millions of rows. There is a lot of data in this data set, and it updates every Wednesday. There are others in my department that use the same kind of data and were making their own data sources that were that large. Well, we were cluttering up the Tableau server with these data sources, with multiple data sources that really said the same thing, that really had the same data within them, just everybody pulled it in their own way. So I kind of got folks together and said, okay, why don't one of us make this data source with all of the data fields that everybody needs, and we can have one data source that's just a little bit larger rather than 4 of them that are all the same size with almost all the same data in it. So it's finding those ways to maximize your server space and maximize the time that's spent, updating and refreshing these large dashboards too, that can make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good points.
Awesome. Well, thank you for chiming in there, Tammy and Colleen, for the wonderful answer. With only 3 minutes left, we're gonna jump in now to our giveaway winners. I want to just note real quick that Norbert did ask a question about a way to dynamically update set members when data is refreshed. I don't believe any of our speakers today mentioned anything about sets, but this is an excellent opportunity to ask questions of your fellow Tableau users. So thank you for the question. Real quick answer from me would be that there are ways to, when you set up your set, instead of making it just clear, like, selected values, you have to actually, create some sort of logic, whether that's, top 10, bottom 10, or some sort of like formula, and that will make your set more dynamic. So I'm happy to take it offline though. Feel free to message us with like offline, maybe on LinkedIn or something. Post the question on LinkedIn, and we will try to answer. But let's move on to our giveaways real quick. Thank you, Andrew and Colleen, for answering our questions. And for coming to speak to us today. It was really lovely having you. I know Tammy's going to thank you again. So let me just do my piece and then I'll hand it over to Tammy. So the 2 people who have won prizes by asking questions are Natasha and Laura. Thank you for the wonderful questions. Thank you for participating. If you would direct message me with your email address, I will send you an email that gives you more information about how to select your prize. So DM me with your email address. Natasha, I already have yours, so don't worry about that. And then our winner from just attending the event in general, I'm picking your name from a list, and it is Christy Berkeley. So if you are Christy, you are on this call, also DM me your email address and we'll get you some awesome swag. So with that, over to you, Tammy.
All right, thanks, Brandy. I want to thank everybody for logging in and participating with us today. We had some great questions, great presentations by Colleen and Andrew. So thank you both. Andrew, we expect a tweet. I don't know if they still call them tweets on X, but we expect a tweet or something with an update on how that crochet project ended up as a wall hanging. So that was really cool. Yeah, that was really cool. I was really fascinated by that. And Colleen, I loved your brewer's dashboard. So that was really cool. And it also inspired me to pick up I tried doing a Tableau resume a long time ago, and then I never followed through with it, but you inspired me to try to follow through with that. So thank you for that. Thank you to both of you. Thank you everybody for joining us. And we are at time. So everybody have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.